All right, now everybody on a new episode of Tennis Channel Inside In as we approach the championship weekend, here to talk some men's semifinal and final action from Monday Match Analysis, from the 3 podcast, from Tennis Channel's airwaves. Gill Gross back again. Gill, thank you for joining me in your Syracuse man cave.
Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate it. It's a newly built little background setup here, so I'm glad you like it. I think you like it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The lighting is what gets me. I'm a big lighting guy, so I think it's good. It's got some good ambiance going.
Always great to be on. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you taking time. You're one of the busiest men in not just podcasting, but keeping the Twitter sphere going on social media and growing the game. We're almost done with our 3rd major of the year, which has been pretty crazy, but it feels like it went by fast. And in another sense, it did feel like we didn't get our footing with Wimbledon for a while, with the rain, with the delays, with the curfew. But, we've started to get into a rhythm. The weather's held up and we got these matches in, which was good.
Yeah, definitely. It was a weird first week because there weren't a lot of shocking results. And we have seen a lot of upsets at Wimbledon. And usually that kind of drives the narrative of the first week of a major. It's not necessarily who won, but it's who lost. And at Wimbledon, I think, you had the Rude loss and, keeping it to the men's side, you had the epic Murray matches and the Tsitsipas 5-setters. But it did feel like a lot of the talk was rain and curfew related, because the top seeds were performing and taking care of their business for the most part.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it's like every major, one person loses or a big name loses. You're like, wow, upsets. But the seeds performed better at this Wimbledon than any Wimbledon, probably. Quarterfinals, I don't think there was a huge, outside of Eubanks, which we'll get to, it was pretty much take care of business across the board. I want to start with the guy you devoted an entire podcast to, or seemingly one, Novak Djokovic. He's into his 11th Wimbledon semifinal, going for his 8th, a record-tying 8th with Roger Federer Wimbledon title. And I had this moment watching his matches, and I wanted to get your, expertise on the situation with Djokovic, because we've seen him, I think it's fair to say, play higher level Wimbledon matches. We've seen maybe a little bit more. But what I wrote down when I was watching his matches, the Hubie match, even the Stan match, and then, getting back against Rublev, it was just classes in session. Like, he knows what he has to do out there. He knows how to find a way to win. He knows the geometry of the court, and he knows how to play grass court tennis at a level that, these young pups, these young boys aren't quite there. And you saw it with some of the post-match analysis and some of his thoughts, but I just think he knows the game, the art of grass court tennis, and that's really what's gotten him to yet another semifinal.
Yeah, and he's just got everything he needs. There's the offensive side of things, which is maybe less talked about, especially because the evolution of his career has made it that we kind of got to know Djokovic as more of this, I don't know, defensive beast, consistency, grinder, court coverage. But you look at his grass court game now, the spot serving is incredible. The percentage for serving is unbelievable. The precision and the damage he does with the +1 is great. He threatens with the drop shot and the net approaches off of that +1. So offensively, he's a beast. And you look at the first serve win percentages, and they're routinely on grass through the roof. They're like 80% is normal for him on grass. But then you take a matchup like Hurkacz, or a matchup like Rublev, where you're looking at guys who bring different things to the table offensively. Rublev with the power from the baseline, and Hurkacz with one of the great serving performances you can possibly have. And then it's, okay, let's see what Novak's return can do against Hurkacz. Unbelievable returning in the break of serve in the 4th set that he used to beat Hurkacz. Yeah. Or let's see the court coverage. Nobody moves better. Nobody's more balanced defending on this surface. And that comes in handy, because it's like Rublev needs to play, instead of 3 great forehands, 4, and he misses the 4th. So there's such a wide range of things he can do on the grass, no doubt.
Yeah, the unforced forced stairs. I know that's Amy Lundy's area. I don't want to step on her corner there, but it's what Djokovic does to you. It's, even like the Stan match, 3rd set, Stan played as good as I think I've seen him play on a grass court. Djokovic wins in that tiebreak. Hubie served amazing and put himself in such a position in those first 2 sets. Didn't win any tiebreaker when he had the chance. Rublev, we know, can redline and did redline a bit in that first set, but there is no panic too. And there is a sense of calmness with Djokovic that maybe he's grown into in recent years. I just want to know your take on, because we're starting to see not him get arrogant, but some of the quotes and some of the comments like, look, I'm the old dog and I'm not giving up the yard. Do you think that was kind of always in there, or is he just growing into that, accepting his role?
I do think it was always in there. And I think maybe he wanted to be careful of just not applying unnecessary pressure on himself. I think that's the first thing. And we saw, look, I don't want to make a apples to oranges comparison, but like we saw, for example, Sebastian Korda decided to make some statements before Wimbledon. And sometimes that's just not a good idea when it comes to your ability to perform, because you're putting pressure on yourself. So maybe that was part of why Novak would kind of hold back the arrogance a little bit. But I also think he's starting to understand that can be appealing in a lot of ways. And Novak, I think in the past has maybe felt like, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers because I actually want to get the mainstream love. I think it's a misconception. Obviously he wants support, and people like to say he doesn't want support, and it's there's no evidence for that. Of course he wants the support. We saw how emotional he was at the US Open when he finally got the support in New York. But I actually think he was always a little bit off about the effects of confidence and arrogance. And now I think he understands that his fans, especially, they love it because it's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is. He was always had the confidence even before he got to anywhere close to this level. So it's great to see. He's going to play Jannik Sinner in the next round. And before we get to Sinner's side of things and what happened last year in this matchup, what do you think Djokovic can improve? I noticed that second serve, the pace isn't quite what it was. Sinner is, has hit some rips off the second serves of anybody he's played. But what can Djokovic level raise? What can he do to improve going into these final two matches, presumably?
Good question. Technically speaking, I also maybe would have brought up the second serve. Sinner's going to threaten off of both wings with the power off of the second serve return as well. So when you have a guy like Rublev, for example, you can kind of hit second serves to his backhand, and they can maybe come in at 95 miles per hour, and you're probably not going to get punished to the fullest extent. But Sinner will not let Novak get away with that. So that's one thing to watch. The real answer is it's all about nerves. And I think sometimes if he gets a little tight and the ground stroke quality can dip and the depth can decline, which we've seen in moments in some of these tie breaks where it's like, okay, Novak's not really playing with full freedom right now. That's where Sinner can have an opportunity to use his power to do massive damage. You drop the ball short against Jannik, and he's going to make you pay, as well as anyone in the world can make you pay off of those short attackable balls. And Mitch, we saw like 2021, when Djokovic was going for the Grand Slam, his match against Shapovalov, his match against Berrettini in the final, there was tightness in those matches. He wasn't playing his best in those matches. And that's kind of Sinner's hope, that Novak gets just a little bit stiff in the arm, and that kind of takes away some of the quality.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're realists. You're probably going to need him to be off to have a realistic chance. If you're not, I mean, we'll talk about the other side of the draw, but for Sinner. So possibilities there. Before we get to Jannik, I hate to bring it up, but Rublev now 0-8 major quarterfinals. And I mean, it's cliche to say, is it mental? Is it physical? Because we know what Rublev can do, king of the 500s and all that stuff. But he's gotten to this point and he's gotten denied 8 times. What stands out the most about this roadblock, this massive roadblock for a talented player?
Well, the way I like to look at it, Mitch, is what your mind can allow you to do is play to your best, the best of your abilities. So this one wasn't mental, because I thought Rublev played a great match. And I think that's where, as observers of the game, we need to go a little bit beyond the record and kind of watch the match and decide what we're actually seeing. Right. And I think in this case, it was like, well, we saw a guy who's technically not good enough to beat Novak Djokovic, even if he plays his best. That was the reality. If you look at the record, I think a lot of matches fall into that category. Now, for sure, he was underperforming in a lot of these matches because, Mitch, he was 0-15 in sets against top 5 players in these quarterfinals.
Yeah, Australia, like, I'm not we wouldn't pick him to beat Djokovic based on the matchup, but he didn't play as well as he did in this Wimbledon.
Right.
So it's a little
Exactly.
different there. Yeah.
Exactly. He underperformed, and he has underperformed, honestly, not just in a lot of, major quarterfinals, but even before Monte Carlo and a lot of the Masters finals that he's been in. So there was kind of a big match issue with Rublev. There's no doubt about it. The ones he would want back, though, if you really look at the quarterfinal record, it's Cilic at Roland Garros last year, and it's Tiafoe at the U.S. Open last year. Probably even more so Cilic. Now, both of those players, bad matchups in certain ways for Rublev, but those were the ones. Other than that, he's been playing guys who he's not expected to beat.
Yeah, that's such a fair point. The sets thing, though, is a little different too. Like that's one where it's like you gotta, adrenaline rush push. And he did take a set off Djokovic in this one. So hope to see some trends, some trending things up in the right direction, things he can work on. But Djokovic's next opponent, Jannik Sinner. And we can talk about the draw opening up and the breaks going down or breaks going his way, Gill, but Jannik Sinner still had to walk through that door. And this is a monumental step for a guy still very young in his tennis career to get to his first major semifinal and to get another crack at Novak Djokovic, who, let's say he had on the ropes, but taking 2 sets off Djokovic in any major match is a huge accomplishment. So Sinner walking through that door, Gill, I think shouldn't be understated enough.
Yeah, Sinner had to handle that pressure. And by the way, there wasn't a lot of momentum in his season, which is weird to say because we wouldn't have said that in April. But if you looked at all of his events since Monte Carlo, that's where most of the worst losses of his season have occurred in the lead up to Wimbledon, and obviously coming off of a loss to Daniel Altmaier at Roland Garros that was incredibly disappointing. So you're right. He comes into Wimbledon with not a lot of form, a retirement, and the draw opens up. And here's a guy who's got so much expectation on him for his age. Yeah. And you're right. He had to do it, and he's played really good tennis. He has. Although it's hard to tell how good when when your highest ranked opponent is I think 79 in the world, Contan Alice. It's hard you don't get that barometer, that measuring stick.
Where do you rank his, and just as a curious question, like he'd been quarterfinals at every major, every surface. Yeah. So is grass higher on the list, lower on the list? Like where would you put the pecking order of where his game succeeds the most?
Good question. I mean, I think the real honest answer is it does not matter. Surface does not matter for Sinner. He plays the exact same no matter what surface he's on. Yeah. Look, I think there's similarities with 2 other players on tour, Rublev and Fritz. It just these power baseliners are just power baseliners. And I think there's some nuances about contact points, like does Rublev have trouble with the low backhand? Is Fritz's forehand worse from a low contact point than it is a high contact point? There's little nuances there, but in general, power translates across all surfaces. Big serves translate across all surfaces. And those guys just aren't really having to change their game much from surface to surface.
That doesn't, encourage me about his prospects against Djokovic. I'll say I agree with that breakdown, but a guy like Novak on grass who's gonna make you change your game gets another crack at him though. And I think in one setting you have Jannik Sinner coming in with his first major semifinal, talked about it, joked about it, said at least give me this moment. I made a semi. But Djokovic has the experience and has the experience from last year where he knows, look, I can't exactly mail it in. I can't exactly just show up. Last year, he did catch himself behind the 8 ball. So in a weird way, that will probably help Djokovic prepare a little better.
Yeah, it might. It was a strange match last year. I don't think there was any tactical adjustment made by Novak. I just think he made some surprising sloppy errors in the first 2 sets. There were a lot of mistakes, and Sinner kept it clean. And then in the last 3 sets, Novak played as clean as a human can possibly play. It was unbelievable how few mistakes Djokovic made in the last 3 sets. The forehand consistency was a big gulf last year. I'm curious to see if it's a big gulf again here. It's just, Djokovic has this incredibly technically sound, compact, and precise forehand that he times beautifully. And Sinner brings a ton of power off that wing, but it's just not quite as controlled. It can spray a little bit. He can mistime the ball a little bit more often. And I'm wondering if we'll see that again. Plus the legs. I don't know. Sinner has made a huge improvement from last year to this year, just in terms of his physicality. Last year, he was getting injured. He was worn down by the quarterfinals every week. And this year, he's not that guy. But if you look at his 5-set record, Mitch, just something to keep in mind coming into the match. 5-6, all 5 wins were like situations like Altmaier at the U.S. Open last year, where it's like, why are you in a fifth? Those are all 5 of the wins.
I don't think, everyone's been talking about Hoger, which we'll touch on, but Sinner's in that sneaky, like, hey, I'm not sure about this guy in a 5-set match too. Very good point to bring up. Also, probably not in his best interest to get in a tiebreaker with Djokovic. I'm just going to say that as well.
It's become an aura thing and a mental thing. I actually think that Novak at Wimbledon has been not quite as good in the tie breaks, and he still keeps winning them. He wins every time.
It's crazy stuff. More here with Gill Gross on Tennis Channel Inside, and want to talk about the other half of the draw, and going to give some love to, the guy that was eliminated recently. But Chris Eubanks going on that run, Gill, was just a remarkable set of circumstances. Hadn't even won a main draw match in any Grand Slam until last year's U.S. Open. And he gives the Neil Medvedev, after beating Tsitsipas, after beating Cam Norrie, all Medvedev can handle, loses in a 5th set. It's just really fun to see, a good guy, someone that we know at Tennis Channel do so well, but also see someone's game kind of all come together on the biggest stage of them all. Was there, I guess for you, the question is, how shocking is it that a player like him, a game like that, could come together and look, as potent as anyone on that grass?
I can't say I saw it coming, but if you're going to tell me that a 27-year-old is going to suddenly just flip a switch and be someone who he wasn't for the previous parts of his career, I would have told you that, oh, well, said 27-year-old is probably a 6'7" guy who has this laundry list of tools to work with and just had to figure out his identity on court and when to use what and how to, take care of his body. And I just think big guys, offensive players, one-handed backhands, those are all areas where I think it takes some time. And my favorite part about the Wimbledon run for Eubanks is just that everything he's doing is on his own terms. He's not relying on his opponents to miss at any step of the way. He's pulling off these upsets. He's pushing Medvedev on his own terms. And that's been incredible to watch. I think he set a record at Wimbledon for most winners.
He did. He broke Andre Agassi's record for most return winners in a tournament. Didn't even make the semifinals doing it. That clean one-handed backhand, I guess next time I see him, I'm gonna have to be like, where did that come from? Because it had some easy power on it. But my other big point on this, Gill, is that maybe grass, and maybe this is kind of hot takey, but the players don't have as many reps on grass. So if it's going to come together for players, maybe we should not expect this, but grass will be the surface where if it all comes together in a flash, it would be here because the season is so short.
Yeah. We saw, I'm not making an apples to apples comparison once again, but we saw like Tim van Rijthoven last year. That was an unbelievable run where he beat Fritz, he beat Medvedev, he beat another FAA and another one-handed backhand hyper offensive game. Now, obviously Chris is going to look to follow that up and build on that better than van Rijthoven did. But I would say it is a surface where you can have, I don't think it's capitalizing on a weaker field. I don't think it's that, but I think there are certain weapons that can be really great on grass, like a chip and charge return that a guy like Eubanks is utilizing on a regular basis that guys aren't used to seeing. And on grass, it's just working super, super well.
Yeah. I mean, it was a life-changing run for him into the top, like 31, I think, in the live rank now. And, is going to get seeded and has some life-changing money, which is good, unless you're like Novak Djokovic, or I think like Kevin Costner's ex-wife, it's life-changing money. But anyway, he loses the Medvedev. And I want to point out with Daniil Medvedev, he battles, he gets to another major semi, he gets to one on his, not one of his favorite, not his his favorite surf. I don't think there's anyone, Gill, that plays the dead cat game better than him, because it's always like he's acting like, oh, I'm checking out, I'm going south. This is very tactic like to me, because he is in the fight and stays engaged. And I thought even when all the theatrics was going, he played a tight, big point heavy, brave tiebreak, and one going away in the fifth. So props to Daniil Medvedev. He's just so match tough out there.
Toughness is a great word, because not a lot of guys are as comfortable sticking with their game plan, sticking with their guns, and doing, trusting their defense, trusting their movement and their counter punching, and just being like, I'm just going to stick with it and it'll start to work as if I execute it. And it doesn't matter what surface I'm on, and it doesn't matter who I'm playing. And more on that probably later if you want to talk about the Alcaraz match, because I have a point about that.
No, we can get to that. I just wanted to give Medvedev his love, because what he's doing and, the standard he's set for himself on the hard courts, it'll be impossible for him to achieve that on other surfaces, but he's not a scrub on clay, and he's certainly not a scrub on grass, and he gets to a semifinal, and he just continues to play at a level that is baseline as good as anyone. So props to him. Alcaraz is who he meets in the semifinal. Another guy who, like, all worldly talent. We were wondering, when is it going to come together on grass? Is it going to take some time? Well, here he is in the Wimbledon semifinal. So not as much time needed for Carlos. The Holger match. Let's start there. I think Carlos did what he needed to do. And I think the underrated part for me, Gill, is that it was a little Djokovic-like, and this is where I would draw a comparison. He plays big points pretty smart. Like, you'll watch the highlights and you'll see all the hot shots and all the amazing movement he can do. But I think he has a very smart understanding for how to play big points.
Maybe after the first set when he calmed down.
Yeah.
I thought, I think nerves were really the big story in the first set, where it was like, I think there were 5 love 30s, and it felt like the returner every single time would kind of have a panic attack at love 30, and their level would drop, and then we would get a hold, and then we went to the tiebreak. But Alcaraz has totally improved in that area this year, Mitch. I think that Juan Carlos Ferrero has gotten into his head of just when to pull back just a little bit. And I think when we were first watching Alcaraz make his rise, let's say last March, one of the things that was so impressive was, wow, so brave in these big moments. Like, you're playing drop shots on the biggest points of the match. You're going after it, the biggest points of the match. And all that stuff was good. But then I think recognizing when the arm is a little bit tighter and you're actually feeling the pressure, when to get consistent, when to get solid. Mm-hmm. And I now think Alcaraz at least has that gear. Even though on the grass, I think he's going to be even less likely to use that gear. I think that's been a big improvement this year for him, though.
Yeah, it reminded me of a certain Greek player that might not, be playing, might not be playing the score as well as he should at times. But I agree. I think Ferrero, the work that they've done together has just been very tremendous. And on Holger's side, just to touch on him, he's, he gets criticized a lot, and we all know that there's validity to it. I think he's saying and behaving the right way in post-match. Like, he acknowledged a real problem. I need to be in the fight longer and more consistent, because as great as he is, and he looks great, he looks as good as Alcaraz at times, there are stretches in these matches where he just goes away. Mentally, he's in a different place, and you can't, like, he acknowledges it. I can't do that and expect to win against the very best.
I don't think Holger's ever said anything in a press conference that has contributed to his reputation. That's the thing. It's all on court. It's always during match stuff, which is fascinating, because most players, it maybe is the opposite. Yeah, I think that Rune is not a consistent match player at all yet, mentally or physically. We've talked about the physical ups and downs. I guess in this match, because let's be tangible about it and talk about details and provide evidence. Like, for me, it was the return of serve, where he seemed a little bit checked out on the tactics there, where he was getting jammed up in the body on every second serve return and just never moved back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. Match point was the second serve that he just pushed long, and it wasn't there. He's still like, and again, we fall into this trap too, right? Like, you can't compare everyone to Alcaraz. You can't compare players to Djokovic. Oh, this is this is a crazy expectation to have. So I'm still in the belief that he will figure most of this stuff out. The question is how quickly, and is it going to be good enough to challenge a player like Alcaraz that's going to be improving, we think, on the way up too.
Yeah, exactly. He's 20, and that's why I predicted him before the year. It's always YouTube comments, Mitch. That's how I understand the tennis community discourse. I predicted him to finish year end. I think number 8. I think it was number 8 or something like that. And that was considered a low prediction.
Only one spot up or so, one or two spots up from last year. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm like, look, this is hard. He's 20. It's not easy to get into the top 5. He might do it. He might prove me wrong. I'm not even saying that I'm going to be right. But the fact that because of maybe what Alcaraz did, it's like, whoa, you don't think Rune is about to be top 5? It's like, wait, that's the baseline. Like you're really saying that I'm giving a
number 1 of all time.
Right. A pessimistic prediction is that a 20-year-old is going to finish 8 in the world. Really? So that's where there is sometimes a lack of perspective.
Well, I think it's at least encouraging to hear him say the right things. It's very encouraging to see Matteo Berrettini back and playing at a high level. Alcaraz match wasn't his best, went through a lot though to get there. And just to see it and to also hear him say it, that look, I was in a bad place physically, mentally. That match was, he got joy out of competing at the highest level, and he loves being back out there. And I think on the grass, especially, he showed you why. He showed you in the Sonego match and what he did to Demonauer, Zverev, that Berrettini still has a lot of good tennis in front of him. It's good to see him getting back on the right track.
There's also been a lot of unfair criticism levied at him, with his sponsorships and his modeling and the Hugo Boss, because, that kind of happened. And then some bad results came and people are like, hey, buddy, why don't you focus on tennis? Why don't you care about, why don't you care about tennis anymore? And it's like, come on, guys, I'd like to see you turn down those paychecks. And I just hope that what Berrettini has opened up about will dispel any notion that this guy doesn't want it bad, isn't fully committed to playing winning tennis. And the fact that he's on a Hugo Boss poster shouldn't change that perception at all. Mitch, it's phenomenal how well he played, given, the time that he missed in the lead up. And against Alcaraz, I'll say the return of serve was unbelievable. And that's the thing with Berrettini, bringing it back to the tennis, is when he's playing the elite and they are neutralizing his first serve, then what? The then what is tough for him. And I don't know how much he'll ever really be able to do against players who are returning his serve well.
It's a ceiling issue, but hey, we're talking about the very best that give him these problems. So something to see there. Before we wrap this up with Gill Gross, just want to fly through a couple of quick things. Not the best for the American men. We had Eubanks, obviously, but subpar losses for Tiafoe and Fritz. Paul lost of course, Korda. Paul lost to your guy, Yuri Lehecka. Not a bad loss. That match was actually great. It was just a great match, but a tough one for Paul. So, Eubanks notwithstanding, the American men came into Wimbledon and they leave, not meeting their expectations. Was that surprising on your end to see the collective, unproven results, not achieving what they wanted?
Yeah, kind of shocking to me. I thought Korda had draw opportunity, and I really liked Seb coming into Wimbledon just based on what I saw from him this year when healthy, where, I was thinking about Adelaide. I was thinking about the Australian Open and Queens, and I'm like, whoa, when this dude has been at his best, he's been like a top 10 player. So I was really high on Korda. Fritz, he had a good grass court season last year, and I knew that the early rounds might be shaky for him. I thought, Yannick Hoffman, that's a tough unseeded player to play first round. He got through that, and I'm like, whoa, okay, now we're in business. Yeah. And then he's 2 sets to love up against Michael Liemer. I still don't fully understand what happened in that match. So Fritz, surprising. And then Tiafoe, I think Grigor was playing tremendous ball, but also, it seemed like, and especially reading what Francis had to say about it, it seemed like Tiafoe just had a mystifyingly bad 2 days, which was part of why it was so surprising, because it was over 2 days.
Yeah, it was brutal for him, and he admits it. And that was shocking that when action picked up down in the second set, he still didn't have much. So we hope those guys bounce back. I also got to point out another one of your players that you mentioned the last time you're on this show. Fakina, where are we at with serves in general at 8-8 in a match tiebreak?
We are number one in the world at losing at Wimbledon in creative ways. That's where we're at
next year. Honestly, like I'm on my toes. That was so bizarre, right? Like I know tactically, and I know it's like, okay, do what you want and we can debate. But doing it then was the problem that I had, and I think a lot of people had. Like, you're gonna do this at 8-all against Holger.
It's always questionable tactically. I think from where you and I agree, Mitch, is that from a sportsmanship thing, it's a non-issue. That's where you and I are on the same page. But tactically, it's never smart. And here's how I explain it. And I know, this isn't necessarily the point. It's the fact that he was just nervous at 8-all. But for the sake of conversation, let's break this down. What makes a good drop shot? Let's start with disguise. Can you disguise an underarm serve? Does it look anything like an actual serve? No.
No.
It looks nothing. So you're never going to disguise that shot well. You can get it off quickly, but still, it doesn't really work. All right, what about your opponent's court position? First of all, look where Rune was standing. Not that far back. But also, you have a player who's literally in a ready position to return the serve. You're never going to get a player leaning back. You're never going to get a player leaning left or right or off balance. They're perfectly on balance when you hit it. Plus, you're on the baseline. You cannot hit an underhand serve from where it's great to hit drop shots from, which is inside the court. So all of these, if you just break down what makes a drop shot effective, and then you translate it to, can that work on a serve? It's like, no.
That's very well put. Yeah, I think you'd have been better off maybe going behind his back, like walking to the service line, just trying to sneak one in that way, or even pointing into the crowd like, hey, what's that? And then maybe getting him to turn but hey, tremendous player. We'll see what happens there. Gill, this has been fun. Last thing, I guess, on the semis, do you feel like we're trending towards that Alcaraz Djokovic final? I mean, both of them are pretty solid favorites. Medvedev seems to be a little bit of a stiffer test, but are we trending that way?
I do, Mitch. First of all, you're very much in the three, the podcast about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, Tennis Channel Podcast Network. We don't get too much about like prediction. Who do we think's going to win? Like, we like to talk about the match.
That's how I do it. Yeah. And as a fan,
I love it.
Show too. We don't want to just, we also want to cover our bases too. I don't want to be like, I guarantee it. And then I come on and like, well, I was wrong again.
Exactly. So kudos, we're on the same page there. But here's what I think about the semis. Yes, I do think we have a Djokovic Alcaraz final. When it comes to Medvedev, credit to him for staying true to himself. But I still think the fact that he has not added any extra aggression in his game, that he has not adjusted his court position whatsoever, it's going to get him in trouble against an elite offensive repertoire. It almost got him in trouble against an excellent offensive repertoire in Chris Eubanks, and I think Alcaraz can do all of those things just as well. And I think Carlitos is going to take it to him and take advantage of some of those positional downfalls. And then when it comes to Sinner Djokovic, it's a little bit less tactical. It comes down to mentally, Novak stronger, physically, Novak stronger. Pace absorption wise, like when players try to attack Djokovic with linear pace, that doesn't work all that well. So, just classic kind of Djokovic situation where you have trouble seeing where the cracks are going to ultimately be.
Well, I can't wait. If we get that final, it'll be a phenomenal matchup. Hopefully we get, both players in full form. If not, if there is an upset, that's good too, because these are all just quality players. So Gill, appreciate you coming on the show. We'll have to check in down the road and see where we are in the state of tennis, but a good place right now with Djokovic going for, major number 24 and one more away from a calendar slam situation. It'd be pretty remarkable. But Gill, always reliable, always steady, kind of like Alexander Volkanovski on this show. So,
wonderful compliment. Pound for pound, number one. Hey, I don't weigh a lot, so I have a shot at pound for pound.
Oh, I think until Volk goes up, maybe we can get you in there. He's looking for featherweight opponent.
Anytime, Mitch. Anytime.
Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on Inside In.